All rail fans can agree that rail fanning is a very hit or miss hobby. Sometimes the day is filled with action from the start, and other times it takes a day to see one train or none, as happened here along the Clearwater Sub in North Tampa. We had camped out in Tampa for the past 2 hours, and seeing and hearing nothing, we chased the only thing that was in the area, local L755. This train runs north out of Yeoman Yard to Drew Park to switch industries and the massive auto ramp that is responsible for all of Tampa's autorack traffic. Today he'd have no freight or autoracks, but his solo Jeep 38-2 still looked good passing the old Seaboard approach signal. The signal has been telling trains for decades that they're approaching TN Interlocking, a once busy diamond where the Seaboard crossed the Atlantic coastline into Tampa. We chase L755 up to Bush, where the tracks parallel the road for a few miles. Here is a sight you don't see often, a well-kept commercial office complex next to a local spur served by CSX. I just had to put the drone up for this shot. Would have been perfect if 755 had a train today. By the time 755 backed into Drew, we had heard that he'd be in there for the next several hours waiting for the driving crews to finish unloading the last few autoracks. With that, we'd head home. Sometimes you expect to see only one train, like the occasions when I make the drive to Lutz to see the Brooksville sub. In early November, Tropical Storm Nicole had just swept through the area, delaying trains and the crews. That would make this rare Monday night catch possible. The previous day, the local hadn't run, so CSX sent out this job to make up for its missed local. I like seeing 6-axle power along the sub, but my favorite is seeing a mix of 6 and 4-axle power leading trains. This was the case in July, as a Jeep 38-3 led a Tier 4 Gevo on L781. Of course, another circumstance is not seeing trains and wondering why not. I was in Plant City just after Thanksgiving last year to enjoy the weather and see any trains that might pass. I was there around lunchtime and I thought it was odd that I hadn't seen Amtrak 91 cross yet. Well, come to find out, CSX was replacing all the jointed rail in Ybor City to continuous welded rail. That would cut off all traffic to and from Tampa Union Station. L779 would pass the Diamond a few minutes later, which would be the only action I'd see this day. Another one-train outing found me in Dade City amidst the crew delays and oddball schedules of the holiday season. I-177, a pre-dawn usual through here, would show up just after 2 p.m. this day, making for a rare midday intermodal. This past Christmas, I made a few outings just to see the Christmas lights and decorations of Tampa and Plant City. We'd stick around long enough to see Y295 with a very long train for his standards, street running through downtown just before 8 p.m. I prefer catching this train in daylight for obvious reasons, and in summer that shot is possible. This is Y295 crossing the Hillsborough River on an early May evening back in 2021. My second and last holiday shoot would take place in Plant City on a chilly December evening. The idea was to get some shots of McCall Park, where the city sets up a beautiful display of Christmas lights and decorations. The city looks even better, however, when the crossing gates light up as well, symbolizing an approaching train. In this case, Tampa Intermodal IO44 would be screaming north with a YN2 leader and a couple surprises right behind.
4417, got a clear Plant City interlocking, Plant City hold out, 257 on that.
Those three blue CSX boxcars labeled "Do Not Hump" are track inspection cars. These were cool to see as they've not come down here in this area for a while, if ever, much less three of them on one train. The white Tropicana cars, which are usually seen on mixed freight train M442, are also on this train. Jacksonville Intermodals are now taking these cars north instead of Waycross, so IO44 and IO45 transport them now as they terminate and originate from Jacksonville. It's still unknown if this operation is solely for peak season, however. After hanging out with my good friend Dakota, we checked the signals to see if anything was coming soon. A high green on the northbound S-Line signals at Sandler Junction would be a nice sight, telling us we had a northbound train approaching. So we'd set up our cameras and wait. It would only be a couple minutes before a trio of foreign visitors would round the corner with Tampa's backhaul of ethanol.
Hey, 638. Hey, 16 got a clear signal, Lake West Junction locomotive. CP, 8500 northbound.
It would be around 9 p.m. now, so we'd start making our way home, but we'd be back out for some more mainline action the next week. Bushnell, Florida. A beloved rail fanning spot for the past 2 decades, Bushnell hosts S-Line action at all hours of the day, seeing road freights and locals, as a couple big industries reside just south of downtown. We made the hour or so drive northeast to the S-Line to hopefully see the Wildwood local L753 working the area. As for the past month or so, a CSX slug set has been assigned to that job. I covered this pair in a video of November rail fanning from a few weeks ago. I'd soon hear over the radio that 753 was heading north instead of south first to switch a few industries around Santos, a siding between Wildwood and Ocala. I was a bit disappointed with that news, but in the radio conversation I heard the dispatcher telling 753 to wait at Oxford for a southbound freight. I wasn't sure who it was, but in about 10 minutes, a clear signal and a headlight would indicate the approaching southbound. In another couple minutes, our train would call out a clear at the south end of Bushnell as M45720, manifest freight from Waycross to Taft, Orlando.
Clear. South end, Bushnell, south end.
Now, a few weeks ago, this train would be running as M455, but CSX is doing CSX things again, resembling the train to 457 for some still unknown reason. This train would be a welcome catch, however, as usually this train runs through here at some ungodly hours of the morning. 457's auto racks would roll south, and once they had cleared, the S-line would resume its mid-morning lull. So we'd take the opportunity to drive back north to Wildwood, specifically Moreland Park, a crossover in the Wildwood double track and the location of where the yard lead splits off from the number 1 main. I'd hear some chatter on the radio around Santos as L753 was talking to an opposing train, checking their train as they passed. So I'd set up just north of the County Road 462 crossing as our southbound approached. Looking south towards the Moreland Park signals, we can see an approach medium aspect for the number 1 main. On CSX trackage, the number 1 will always be the track to the left looking north, or for us looking south, the track on the right. There are some exceptions, especially in massive terminals or yard, but here in Florida, there are almost none. The approach medium is telling our southbound to proceed, approaching the second signal ahead, preparing to stop. That second signal is Turnpike, which is just south of the yard, hinting that whatever's coming will be stopping to switch the yard. However, in a few moments, the signal would upgrade to a high green. Hearing our southbound clear Oxford, we now know that we're waiting on M453, mixed freight from Waycross, Georgia to Miami, Florida, via Baldwin, Wildwood, Winston, and Auburndale. From what I heard on the radio, 453 told the dispatcher that he'd be dropping one of his locomotives in the yard, so the JA gave him this clear, giving 453 the freedom to do any switch work needed, in any space needed. So in a couple minutes, M453 would roll south with 182 cars in trail. Today's 453 would warrant the need for a mid-train DPU. Doing the honors would be ES44AH number 905, a 4,400 horsepower 6-axle GE locomotive. While the distributed power units are mostly used to aid in the pulling of very long and heavy trains, they also help to evenly slow down momentum and create less slack. Currently, the lead locomotives and DPU are being throttled down to slow the train to a stop at the south end of the yard. And about 150 cars into the train, 453 would come to a stop. Oh, wait. Give me a second.
Dispatcher Jacksonville, over. That's 753, over. 15 in across at 3465. 15.
Now, remember that local and Santos sighting from a few minutes ago? While 453 passed, it called the dispatcher to head south towards Coleman to switch a rock customer there. So after a few minutes of 453 sitting on the number 1 main and blocking the track that our local's on, we'd make a dash south to the yard offices where L753 was approaching. We'd have about 2 minutes to spare before 753 showed his face, with the slug leading. Rail fanning is a very hit or miss hobby, but sometimes you hit it just right. This is one of those times. A road slug leading a local in 2022 is something you definitely don't see every day. L753 would have a red signal at the south end of the yard and would stop right next to 453. You can see him dropping that second locomotive in a yard track on the right side of your screen.
Here for another 20.
Alright, gates down, all clear, 20.
We drive up to see 453's lead engine back onto his train, and 753 departs south. L753 would be heading south to switch Coleman Rock, picking up 75 cars for Wildwood according to the dispatcher. Our time in Wildwood would soon expire, so we'd pack up and start heading home. I hope y'all enjoyed a few rail fanning sights from the past year or so. I have plenty more shots and catches that have yet to be posted onto YouTube, so stay tuned for that. But until we meet again trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.